98FM's Podcast Hour.
In the summer of 2004, Shelbourne Football Club stood on the threshold of a new world. Just 30 minutes away from becoming the first Irish club to reach the Champions League group stages, the Reds peered into a realm of riches and glory that once seemed unimaginable.
Well, this is a tie that has certainly captured the public's imagination, and that was reflected in the demand for tickets this week. All 24,000 were quickly snapped up.
In the winter of 2006, Shelbourne Football Club was close to death, drowning in millions of debt and facing the possibility of a sudden, ugly end.
Shelbourne officials will meet with the FAI today to establish why the club has been stripped of its licence to compete in the Premier Division for the coming season.
Shelbourne's incredible rise and dramatic collapse was rooted in the bold, revolutionary and ultimately doomed vision of Ollie Byrne, Shelbourne's owner, saviour and most passionate supporter.
He was warm and likeable on one hand and a tyrant and bully on the other, but he was, hugely larger than life.
Less than 3 years after his finest hour, Byrne would spend his final months battling illness as his life's work crumbled.
Daddy used to say to him, Oliver, it is my opinion that you will build it up and it'll come crashing down.
Oliver Byrne was the youngest son of one-time Shelbourne chairman Andrew Byrne. The football club was the family's obsession and Ollie was raised in its tradition. Andrew Byrne was a solicitor and intended for one of his sons to follow in his footsteps. His youngest child, Oliver, started on that path, studying law. Andrew Byrne arranged it so that when Oliver completed his studies, he would take a job in a legal practice, which he would one day take over. Joe Byrne, Ollie's brother.
Oliver dropped the bombshell, as he normally did, when he told the old man that he was giving up the legal business and he was going into the bands. Well, that was like a red rag to a bull. My father just couldn't handle it. So he said to him, "You what?" He told him that he was going to go into the band business. There was more money in the band business. In any event, the old man said to him, "Well, if you're going to do that, you're not going to stay here." And Oliver had to go out and get himself an apartment. And he was out for a few months. And I think my mother softened him up a bit and persuaded him to let him back home, But in any event, after that, my father was always very cool with Ollie.
It was the late 1960s and something new reverberated in the Dublin nighttime. At once glamorous, dangerous and seductive, the burgeoning rock scene drew Byrne away from the quiet respectability of the legal profession. Ollie saw the world of managing bands as a way to share in the excitement and began putting on gigs. He hired a group named Skid Row to play Temple O'Glaun Tennis Club. The band was fronted by Phil Lynott with Bruce Shields on bass.
Phil had this idea that he'd come on with no shoes on, he's a good showman now, so he had a great show. And after halfway through the first number, this guy that looked like a bit like a young George Hook arrived and started waving his hands. Someone Phil to put his shoes back on, he was taking the band off there and then. So my first words thought he was off, you idiot. And then he looked up and he said, "What are you fucking talking about?" And that's how we could have started on that off now, that sort of stuff. So we played 3 or 4 numbers around the storm. Then Ollie came up to the end and says, "Is anybody getting us any gigs?" No, he said, I wouldn't mind getting you a few gigs. I said, "What do you know about gigs?" He said, "No, but, alright." So that's how we started. He had 2 problems. One was, he knew nothing about music, nothing about music. Ollie had never said to you, "Oh, this number, or close with that number," or he had no interest in that. What you have to understand about rock at that time was boys' music more so than anything else. But he was just in there, one of the lads, and he could never be a manager in the strict sense. He was there sort of between you and wherever your next move was. But he could get gigs and he could do this, but he couldn't organise a recording deal, but he thought he could.
Byrne began working for nightclub owner Bill Fuller as his right-hand man, travelling around Dublin City at night on his scooter to keep watch over Fuller's various enterprises.
Bill owned all these ballrooms, the Crystal, the Town and Country, the Iron, the Old Shilling. He owned a lot of places, you know. But Ollie would go around, sort of, whatever Ollie's job was, he'd go around and check that, you know, this and that and the other, everything was all right. I remember one night he headed into the Town and Country. When there were Tundays, a row started, and Freddie, the lad who was driving our van, Freddie got stabbed, and Ollie collapsed. You know, he actually, I thought that was nice. Like that, he actually thought enough of Freddie that he collapsed and Freddie got stabbed. It was that sort of stuff. There was always a kind of a, because of the ballroom thing, there was always an air of violence around the ballrooms. You know, always tough, and it kind of suited Ollie, you know.
Byrne opened his own club in Dublin's north inner city, The Countdown. This went through several iterations over the next decade, with Byrne reinventing it from a rock club to a disco and eventually a nightclub named La Dolce Vita.
We had The Countdown, and the police were always trying to close him. And the same policeman arrived every Saturday night to him. And I seen him grappling with Ollie. And I couldn't believe it. They rolled down the stairs. There's quite a few stairs now. There's like nothing small. Two of them rolled down and landed on the bottom. I can remember the night they found they were bankrupt, you know, they were closing. And the guy who put the wording in decided who was ever getting it next wasn't it. I remember watching them pulling the wording out of the wall. It was one of those places, you know. There's an artistic success but a financial failure.
While Byrne made his mark on Dublin's nightlife, the football club he loved was in ill health. Shelbourne was renting grounds across the city, eventually ending up at the decrepit Harold's Cross Greyhound track. Off the field, the club struggled for survival, while on it they underwent a seemingly endless stream of humiliations. Liam O'Connor, lifelong Shelbourne supporter and one-time board member.
The team and officials and sports went on the same bus. That's how well supported we were, you know. Crowds really dropped off in the 70s and that, you know. I mean, I remember in 62 we played Atletico Madrid and there was 15 or 20,000 in Dalymount on a Wednesday night, and we played previously in the previous round we'd knocked out a Portuguese team, Belenenses, as well, you know. But then from the 70s, yeah, 76, 77, 78, that was when really the wheels came off.
Sean Fitzpatrick, Shelbourne supporter.
It was appalling. Like, it was absolutely, the place was a dump. The pitch was non-existent, you know, and it was very, very hard. It was tough going, being a supporter. I mean, it was a Greyhound stadium, whatever, and that's what it was meant to be.
There was no first division in those days, so you would have to go for re-election if you finished in the bottom two. And for a while we were regularly re-elected to the league at the AGM, you know. I think in a way, I suppose the revival started with Ollie, really, you know, and he wrote a new rule book for us, you know.
In 1976, Byrne was inducted to the Shelbourne board, but the opportunity to make his mark was curtailed sharply when the following year he was banned from football for 5 years.
We were playing Waterford and the referee had given Waterford 2 penalties. Then we saw this figure jumping over the small wall and proceeded to pummel the referee and eventually headbutted him to the ground, you know, and started kicking him around, you know. And so I think he was arrested and he was brought to court. I think he got a suspended sentence, and he burst onto the scene with a bang, didn't he?
In the early 80s, Byrne had left the music business and started a new venture with a shop in Dublin's Ringsend. It would be the site of an incident that drastically altered the course of Byrne's life and the future of Shelbourne Football Club. In 1983, Byrne was sentenced to 3 years in prison for possession of a large quantity of stolen cigarettes purchased for his shop. He would serve roughly 1 year behind bars. At his lowest moment, crippled with shame over the disgrace he had brought his family, Byrne decided to dedicate himself fully to his one true love, Shelbourne Football Club.
Like everything else, that didn't stop him. Afterwards, you know, nothing stopped him. You know, he was just one of these people that whatever he wanted to do, he would do it.
From prison, Byrne set about orchestrating how he would assume control of what he saw as his family's football club.
So when he was in there, you know, he had loads of time to think, and he worked out how he was going to get it. He used to ring at 12 and 1 o'clock in the morning, and wanted me to do this, that, and the other, and get this and get that. And I used to say, Oliver, I can't keep. Oh yeah, he would do that, and he'd say, I need it done now. See this person, see that person, ask this person to contact him. He was all the time. Now make sure you give the message to him. I want him to come and see me or ring me. And he got around some warden down there who let him use the phone.
Byrne arranged that he, along with a small band of supporters, would take control of the club upon his release. One of that group was Liam O'Connor. While Byrne was in prison, O'Connor was working with him and several others to take control of the club.
We actually got the shares back from, but we didn't realise that while we were going along and negotiating or talking about getting the shares back and what sort of financial consideration, which wouldn't have been much, we didn't realise that. I surmised since that Ollie was obviously on from prison all the time, and we were just puppets, and he was pulling the strings from Shelton Abbey, and we didn't realise it. He always felt that the club was his, really, just waiting for him to take his throne again,
With control of the club secured, Byrne met Tony Donnelly, a millionaire fruit dealer in the late 1980s. After a brief courtship, Byrne convinced Donnelly to put his financial backing behind Shells. The pair found the club a home, ending decades of wandering. Talca Park was purchased and transformed into a modern all-seater stadium, Ireland's first.
The whole club, the finances of the club changed, and Tony had the financial muscle to give us a winning horse in the race, basically, So without Ollie, that wouldn't have happened.
In 1992, Shelbourne were crowned champions of Ireland. It was a revival that a few years previously would have sounded like outrageous fantasy.
Let's go from long range. Oh, it's in the back of the net. Barber's goal. It must be 35, 40 yards out.
You have to look around you and see the people that have had nothing, and now they have something, and you say, well, thank God for that.
They were bridging a gap of 30 years since the previous occasion a player in the famous red shirt of Shelbourne lifted the trophy. Club secretary Ollie Byrne.
To achieve it now, particularly when you're aware of, for instance, you have had programmes on the extinction of Shelbourne Football Club, and the papers have written their epitaph, and for the club to rise like the phoenix out of the ashes, it's something you just can't explain, and you can't express your feeling. It's just some satisfaction that you have in there, knowing that everybody else who's stuck by this club is now happy, and that gives you great satisfaction. As the chairman often says to me, he says you build castles in the sky. So I suppose I'm a supreme optimist. Really, the only time I knew we were going to win the league was 5:10 on Sunday when we'd won it.
The 90s would see Shells regaining their spot as one of Ireland's biggest clubs. Driven forward by Byrne's ingenuity and the backing of the Donnelly family, 3 FAI Cups and annual qualification for European competition made it one of Shelbourne's most successful decades. At the start of the new millennium, the Reds would reach even greater heights.
Pat Scully has been presented with a cup and lifts it up to the supporters at Derrybourne Park. Shelbourne are the champions, and Shelbourne are the cup winners. Shelbourne are double champions this season for the first time in the history of the famous old club. And the ball down there, and going, I think, overcome with emotion. They can see Ollie Byrne down there. What a moment for him, Mr. Shelbourne, and he's really enjoying it. He's a smile on his face. Well, it's just literally ear to ear.
Ollie, how does it feel?
Well, the mouths of managers in the league can now shut up and mind their own business instead of interfering with Shelbourne Football Club. Damien Richardson, Roddy Collins, let them mind their own business and let us get on with our job. The team have done the talking for us.
On a night of celebration, that's the view of Ollie Byrne.
Well, they are straight into the point. He shoots from the hip, doesn't he?
Sometimes you're now thinking.
In 2002, Shelbourne made the decision to move to full-time football. It was a major step away from the norm in League of Ireland. Former Shelbourne player and manager Pat Fenlon.
There was no real history of teams in the League of Ireland being full-time, probably bar going back to Johnny Giles when he came there over as a first. But when I signed for Pat tonight, he said, look, I said to you, I was on a tenner a week training in the what we used to call the pig pen behind the shed in Richmond. Woke up to your eyes, sheep, chasing the sheep off that were going to be slaughtered the next day. That was it. But
in terms of just the whole intensity in training and the fitness levels, the overall quality levels, just I think what it was like, win the league, Europe, see cups, forget about it. The only way to get into the Champions League was to win the league. So that was always our goal. That was what we were aiming for, you know. And you got that sense that was the overriding goal, like, you know. And it was almost like a strive for perfection. If you strive for perfection, you'll never get there, but you'll get to a certain level, like, you know.
With the support of the Donnelly family business structure and with successful businessmen on the club board, the club had kept spending in check while achieving on-field success. Former Shelbourne chairman Gary Brown.
The Donnellys were practical business people. They valued the price of their pound or of their euros. We had controls in place. We never spent more than we could generate. We couldn't. So we managed it very closely, but we never overspent. Not in the years I was there.
In 2001, the Donnelly family chose to take a step back from the club, following the death of Tony Donnelly in 1994 and several years later, his son Brian. Ollie Byrne was now operating without the vital support structures afforded by the club's association with the Donnelly business, while also forced to find funding to keep the club going at its current level.
The terrible tragedy was the passing on of both Tony and Brian Donnelly, because they were wonderful people, and they were shrewd businessmen, and they kept complete control of it. And Oliver was in his element. Tony was there, and whatever funding was needed, it was there, you know. But you see, once Tony died and Brian died and Oliver was left with it, he didn't have anybody there that sort of kept control of it. And this is where it all fell down.
During Byrne's tenure, spending at Shelbourne increased at a ferocious pace. The 1992 league title came at a cost equivalent to €250,000. The league and cup double of 2000 cost €750,000. By 2003, annual spending was €1.5 million. To cover the shortfall, Byrne agreed to sell the lease on Talca Park to a consortium of developers in 2003. At the height of the Celtic Tiger property boom, the deal for the ground was potentially worth between €10 and €30 million, depending on several variables. Byrne, ever the optimist, believed the club would receive close to the maximum, build a new stadium, and have enough remaining to fund a squad capable of reaching the Champions League group stages. With the club already in a perennial state of financial uncertainty, Byrne went to the developers and began drawing down millions on the eventual sale price of Talca Park. Rather than treat his money as a safety net, he utilised it as a means to dream even bigger. On the field, success continued, and in 2003, Shelbourne were crowned champions for the 11th time.
Referee has blown full time at Talca Park. There's a pitch invasion here to claim the Shelbourne heroes.
The dream remained unfulfilled, however, and in 2004, that dream would come within touching distance.
And Shelbourne are through to the second round of the Champions League qualifying series after they defeated KO Reykjavik of Iceland on the away goals rule. Pat Fenlon's side will now go on to play Croatia's Hajduk Split in the second qualifying round, with the first leg set to be in Croatia this day next week.
Okay, well hang on, because we've got news of an incredible game tonight in Split, where Hajduk Split have beaten Shelbourne, but it's been a fantastic performance by Shelbourne.
Pat Fenlon's Chargers scored 2 all-important away goals as they went down 3-2 to Hajduk Split in the first leg of their second qualifying round tie. So it could be an historic night at Talca Park next Wednesday for the return leg.
As a manager, the second leg was probably the best it's ever going to get from me as a manager. To see Talca packed, you're in your own country and the club that you've played for and that you're now managing, your own ground is jammed, and just the game plan was one of them days where everything just worked out to a T.
Took the game to them, and that keeper was outstanding, absolutely outstanding for the game. And then Dave Rogers pops up with a stunner of a goal, you know. And
sure up shop, what do we do here? Do we go for it? Do we, you know? So we're thinking, when we said we put Joseph on and give him the ball and let him take it in the corners and kill a bit of the clock.
We knew if they scored one that they'd go through on aggregate. So the last couple of minutes of the game, Joe and Doe come on a sub, and we're screaming at him, go into the corner with the ball, go into the corner. He does a Cruyff turn, rolls across for Anna Moore to slot home, and, jubilation after that.
buy him, that's what I'm saying, after Hajduk, that was probably the best moment he's had in his life. Obviously, you know, proud as a peacock because it was his team and his club.
I mean, you'd go up and get the Evening Herald, and there we were on the front page as well as the back page. I mean, it was just incredible. And I mean, to be in a situation where you're standing with 30 or 40 people in a Greyhound stadium, and then we'd say 20 years later you're playing Hajduk Split, and you're then ended up playing Deportivo La Coruña. I mean, it's just a dream for all of us. You wouldn't swap that for anything.
The whole lead up to it was like it was a proper Champions League. You felt like you were playing Champions League football, because you'd have the televisions, you'd have the cameras, you'd have the interviews. You know, you're getting off the bus and the cameras in your face, and it was just a totally different setup, totally different world than what we play in, week out.
As their European adventure continued into the unknown, Ollie Byrne and Shelbourne prepared for their greatest challenge, and what could be their proudest hour.
You're listening to Never Ignored, Ollie's Reds.
On August 11th, 2004, Shells faced Spanish giants Deportivo La Coruña. Ollie Byrne's Reds had captured the imagination of the Irish public, and as Shelbourne walked out at a sold-out Lansdowne Road, there was a sense that this could be a momentous night for Irish football.
It was a very emotional experience for, I think, anybody who cared about the League of Ireland. I certainly found it emotional, and I think everybody who covered the game and the game here, and people certainly felt that this could be a breakthrough, and so yeah, people really felt that this was kind of coming true of a dream.
Well, who would have predicted that this very week, when the Olympics begin, the Premiership kicks off, and the All-Ireland Championships reach decisive stages, that a National League soccer club would be sharing the headlines with such significant events.
Plenty of movement from Depor in the penalty area. Tandiani went after it, and Drani very nearly on the end of it. We saw him in Euro 2004 getting into those positions on set pieces. This was a close call. Houlihan now has Heary ahead of him. The flag has stayed down. This is a good move from Shelbourne. Two waiting in the centre. Here's Byrne. Just couldn't make decent contact with it. Jason Byrne. Oh dear. And there is the full-time whistle. A capacity crowd have seen Shelbourne of the Eircom League hold Deportivo La Coruña to a 0-0 draw. There could have been so much more for Shelbourne.
What I think you have to put into context now is that 1-1 away from home puts Shelbourne through, and 1-1 away from home puts Shelbourne. I mean, they keep talking about how important this game is. They've switched the tie, but there's 10 million euros at stake here. It's massive amounts of money. They can do it.
Shelbourne visited Deportivo La Coruña with their hopes of reaching the group stage of the Champions League intact.
This is it, lads. This could be it, you know. And at half time, we're 0-0. We'd had a wonderful chance with chasing. We didn't panic because we knew if they scored, we had to score anyway. And ultimately, that's what happened. They scored, and we didn't panic. Didn't panic at all.
And when he added a second on 65 minutes, Javier Irureta's side sensed victory.
He just pinged one straight into the top right-hand corner, and you're kind of mixed emotions going, how did that go in? Like, you know, I suppose that was the deflating one.
Tandiani added Deportivo's third goal 2 minutes from time as his side advanced to the first round proper for a fifth year in a row. Devastated,
like, you know. Because that's, I mean, you take these opportunities only come around. Well, certainly only come around once in your whole career, and that was my opportunity.
In 2004, the Reds won another league title, their 12th overall and the 5th of Ollie Byrne's reign. Emboldened by recent success, Byrne pushed further in the belief that qualification for the Champions League group stages was a real possibility. In 2005, Shelbourne again increased spending, bringing in some of the best players from around the league. But a third-place league finish and an early exit in Europe that year left the club's risky financial strategy badly exposed. In 2006, the cracks began to appear.
As a club, we'd never had a problem with wages. Never, ever. Never. As far as I can remember, we've never had a problem. When I was playing or managing, we never had a problem with wages up till that season.
And when was the first time that people didn't get paid then?
Well, the staff was the first issue. Players, I remember around, I think it'd be around May or June, we had a problem with wages for the staff, and I think in the end the staff went up between maybe 14 and 16 weeks without being paid.
Owen Geary, former captain of Shelbourne Football Club, and the rest of the squad went long periods in 2006 unpaid.
Yeah, 8 weeks in a row, yeah. And there was tough times. I mean, we've all, the squad that was there at the time, we all lent money to each other to help each other out along the way, and any money we got, we'd divvied it up. I'd went to Ollie and I'd say to him, Ollie, any money you get, whether it was 10 grand, whether it was 200 quid, was to give it to myself, and we'll divvy it up whatever way we see fit. I mean, you'd have a lad who would be living at home with his mum and dad, doesn't need the same financial money that a fella has a mortgage to pay or so on. So we pulled through, and as I said, there was no player that was left owed any money from that year.
And what would Ollie tell you when you went to him and asked him?
He was out straight. Ollie was out straight. If he had 1,000 quid, he'd say, "Oh, that's all I'd have." There you go, 1,000 quid. If he had nothing, he'd tell you no. But he would work tremendously hard to try to get some money for us, and even going back. And I think a lot of players had respect, because going back to the times when we did have money, I know those fellas going for mortgages and who couldn't get mortgages, and he helped them out. Players looking to get things, and he'd always help them out. And I think that's the reason why we all believe that Ollie would pull through, and we'd always give him the benefit of the doubt.
With the developers behind the deal to buy Tulka Park no longer willing to front burn money, the chief executive faced a major weekly problem that spun rapidly out of his control. Fintan Cassidy, former voluntary public relations officer at Shelbourne Football Club.
Ollie kind of started off, he borrowing the money through conventional means from the banks. Obviously Tulka Park would have been a kind of bit of collateral there and that, but I know he probably changed bank accounts and moves a couple of times and that, because he wasn't getting satisfaction in one bank, he'd go to another bank. But obviously that kind of came to an end, and then he was doing deals with property developers and so on, and I say he sold Tulka Park and got money up front and all that, and he went back and got more money, but then that money dried up, so obviously he had to kind of turn to other avenues of money, and some of at that stage he was kind of moving down the food chain.
John Phelan, former commercial manager.
The gate receipts weren't adding up, basically. Like, some games you might only get 20 grand or whatever on the gate or whatever.
And how much money would Ollie have to raise every week?
It was a large amount of money. It was over 40 grand a week was the players' wages.
And he had to go out every week and find it?
Well, it had to be found every week, but he had to find it, and he had some good people in the club that helped him, good sponsors, the lot. But where do you go? And he had the right people that he could go to. Ollie had two little brown books, two small little brown books, smaller than A5s, and he'd go through them, and we'd start at the A and work our way through, and we'd knock on people's doors and ask them. And
Joe Casey was Shelbourne accountant and board member from 2001. He is the current club chairman.
People come to the realisation that they were never going to get their money back. Ollie would promise you, he'd literally ring you up on a Friday in a terrible state that he's not able to do it, and what can you do for me? Can you, I'll fix it up as soon as the gate receipts come into my office, and you'd stupidly give it to him on the understanding I was going to come back to you out of the gate receipts, but he would have borrowed 10 other people that day as well, and everybody couldn't get the money back from the gate receipts.
He tried to explain to me long after I'd left the board, he tried to explain to me how things were improving. He showed me a bank statement from, we say, 12 months previously, and it had I can't remember what it was, a certain figure in the red. And then he showed me the current bank statement, and there was a certain figure in the red, but it was a lot less. On that basis, he said, we must be making a profit. But he didn't realise, he never took into account creditors. He never believed creditors existed until he had to actually pay them something.
He didn't quite understand the money part of it, except that his attitude to it was he'd get more money to throw it at the money that was already there. This was the way he did things, instead of realising that all that money had to be paid back at some stage down the line. It'll be all right on the day, this type of thing. It is never all right on the day.
Very difficult to have a logical conversation with Ollie. You could never reason with him in a logical sense. From as I say, a balancing situation, trying to get him that this must balance. You're trying to put structures in place for the following year, and he might adhere to them for the first couple of months, but then he'd be gone astray again. During our famous Deportivo run, the four matches, We made over 600, nearly 700 grand on those 4 games. But all it did that year was make the loss 1.7 million instead of 2.3. But he deemed that to be our success. And that in itself really explains what the type of man he was. He didn't understand that you can't make a 1.6 million loss. You just can't do that. But he said because we didn't make 2.3, that was success.
While debts mounted, Byrne assured his fellow board members that the problems were temporary and could be solved with further success on the pitch and the eventual finalisation of the sale of Talca Park. Byrne convinced those alongside him to stick to his vision.
The times we had were good, and maybe they masked the reality, and maybe you allowed, he was doing that there. It's we're in Europe again next year. That's fine. Don't want to know. That's maybe an element that we subconsciously we all had on the board. Yeah, there's a couple of us that said it in conversation before. Why didn't we get up and walk? We didn't because we probably were enjoying it. We're enjoying the ride at the time. Had we walked, he would have got somebody else. It wouldn't have changed. That is the nature of the man. He had this ability to find people who, what's the word, maybe would take their sensible gene out of their head at the time and go along with him. Anything he did, it wasn't for him. It wasn't to line his pocket. It was for the benefit of the club. So you stayed in with him because of that. Was it worth the ride? I don't know. I'm not sure.
As Byrne stretched himself further, the struggle to pay players became increasingly desperate.
One game in Longford where we hadn't been paid for a long time, and I said to him, you need to sort something out for us, and I said to him, look, we're struggling. It was a midweek game, I'm nearly sure we went down. I said, boys are struggling.
Byrne's unconventional approach to financial planning was just one example of what a strange place Shelbourne Football Club could be during his years in charge.
I suppose when he got a gate, decent gate, and he had to put money in the bank, he used to get a person from the club who used to bring them down, and he used to strap the money around his stomach, sellotape around his stomach, and send them up to the bank with it. Because Ollie didn't believe, he was afraid obviously that people get mugged walking up the bank and things like that, but he used to strap money around him and send them up the bank. So I'm sure he looked at sight walking into the bank and then taking off the money, something like from Midnight Express. You can imagine him standing there. But
there's a time at Talca when all was going on that season as well, where we couldn't even get the pitch cut. We hadn't got the money to pay the groundsman, and I went down one day and he's on the tractor trying to cut the pitch on the machine, in his sandals. So when you know that type of a man, and that's what he's about, because I was giving out to him about the pitch, the grass is too long, need to get a cut. His answer to that was to cut it. So it was brilliant, but it was a great story, because when you come in and see him and he hadn't got a clue what he was doing, so he's got his sandals on. And that's what I'm saying, when them things I think brought us all closer together, to be honest.
I was getting married, and he was to give me money, and again he left me short wages and things like that, so when I did go to him, I said, Ollie, look, I need that money because I need to put deposits down for this and for that, and the usual coming to the wedding. He goes, just tell him to ring Ollie Byrne. I said, I can't tell the photographer, I can't tell the place where we're getting married and the church and everything to say, just ring Ollie Byrne. Like I said, can't do that. I said, I need something to put down, deposit and things like that. Alright. He said, just go up to the bank and just tell them Ollie Byrne sent you up. I said, I can't just go up and say Ollie. He said, just go up and tell them Ollie Byrne sent you up. So I walked up, went in the door, and you're looking around and say, I'm going to feel like I need you here. But I asked for the bank manager, he's looking at me with two heads. Yeah, he said, Ollie Byrne sent me up. Another one, how much do you want? So, and that was, and yeah, we didn't have a penny in the bank account probably. Absolute enigma. Like you don't know what you're ever going to get from him, but you come out with things and you see them happening, and still to this day you look and say, did that really happen? But I mean, even the time he had a fight with Roddy Collins, someone told him that Roddy Collins was bad mounting shells, and that's why he came down and started throwing digs at him. But you look, he didn't even bother asking questions. He was just straight in, and that was Ollie to a T. Don't say anything about shells, otherwise you were getting it.
Byrne attacked rival manager Roddy Collins in 2005 over what he perceived as an insult made in the press. It was an example of Byrne's darker side and his absolute commitment to defend his club and himself at all times. Emmett Malone of the Irish Times.
That's the way it was, like, you know, you could get a call if you wrote something you didn't like, get a call from 9 o'clock in the morning, and you pretty much had to set aside the guts of an hour to argue it out with him. He'd be abusing you, and it would start off really, really heated, and generally it stopped being heated after a while, and it would come down to a more reasonable conversation. And, you know, I like to think I had a decent enough relationship with him, but my God, there were some stormy moments along the way.
Byrne was famed for his ability to use his encyclopedic knowledge of the league rules to Shelbourne's benefit, having player suspensions rescinded, matches rearranged, and even in 2002, having rivals St Patrick's Athletics stripped of 15 points over a player registration row, thereby handing the league title to Shelbourne. Byrne's acts did little to endear him to those outside the club, although he was often begrudgingly admired for his ferocious commitment.
You would definitely get the sense that Ollie was about the only person in the room who knew the rule book, and he would quote rules, and everyone would go scurrying to their rule books to check this up. But he would come prepared. He would have an agenda all his own. In a lot of cases, he would essentially kind of outflank other clubs because he'd know how to pursue his own agenda. And I don't think there's any doubt that some of it, you know, was because people wanted to spare themselves the consequences of not giving him his way, and you can call that bullying, you know. And I've certainly heard people accuse him of that. There were people who had no time for Ollie, who saw him as a kind of scourge, you know, and was in some ways kind of all that was wrong with the league.
As the 2006 season went on, Shelbourne kept up a title challenge while their squad and staff knew the financial situation at the club meant they were likely to depart once the season finished.
It was tough time, to be honest, because you got to the stage where fellas are ringing me and say, I can't get trained, I can't get petrol in the car, you know. So they're difficult things when you're a manager and you're thinking, well, we're playing Bows at a weekend, I need everybody here, you know. But I was proud of the players because they could have down tools, you know, because most of them were up at the end of the year. They knew most of them are going to be gone at the end of the year either way, so it could have been very easy just say, here, just let's sit tight and see what happens and go and get a club for next season and move on. But I mean, I think they got together as a group and said, well, we need to go and win this, you know, we need to. And I think the fact that Ollie was there as well is one of the reasons, you know. It sounds a bit daft, but they would have wanted to win it for him as well, you know.
There is the whistle, it's over, and Shelbourne have fallen over the winners line, and they are Eircom League champions for 2006. It has been such a big battle for them over the last few weeks, and they win the league championship on goal difference. Lucky 13 this is for Shelbourne.
The medals weren't presented to us on the last game of the season, and I had to ring up the FEI, and to get the medals I had to drive over and get them in a box. They gave them to me in a box, and we went up to my local pub up the road and had to hand the medals out to the lads up there, you know. But we went up and handed them out and it was a sad way of doing it, because I handed them out to the players. We had a point or two, and it was, alright lads, all the best.
Just under 2 months ago, Shelbourne were crowned Eircom League champions. It was a night of high drama for the Reds, pipping Derry to the title on goal difference. But it's been all downhill since. Manager Pat Fenlon has gone, and a mass exodus of the players has left the club in disarray.
As the financial problems at Tulka Park deepened, Ollie Byrne struggled in late 2006 to save the club he had built up.
It's a difficult situation. I'm always a supreme optimist, and I keep working away at it. Maybe somebody up there doesn't like me, or maybe somebody up there likes me, and a resolution will be resolved to all these problems. I don't know.
It was hard for me leaving. I got an offer then from Bowes, and then Ollie said, no, look, he said, I'll give you a 5-year deal and I'll make you manager in a couple of years, and I triple your wages and things like that. And I said, Ollie, you know, you can't do that because financially we don't have that money. One, I wouldn't do that on the club, but we don't have that money and things like that. And no, I'm not letting you go to Bowes now, blah blah blah, the whole thing. So you have to let me go. I said, you can't pay me, there's no point. But he was adamant that I wasn't going to Bowes, and so I went to an arbitration. And I said, there's no point. I said, because I'd end up winning it because I hadn't been paid in 8-9 weeks. So he said, no, it cost, I think, $1.5 grand or $1 grand to do, and I said, be better off giving that to players that you owe money to and try sort them out. I'll wait till I get my money further down the line, and you know. But we went in anyway to the arbitration, and I ended up winning it. As soon as I come out, he calls me over. He said, come on, we go for a bit of lunch. So off we went, the two of us, for a bit of lunch, a cup of tea, and he says to me, right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to sell you to QPR this week. I said, Ollie, I'm no longer in a contract. He said, no, we're going to sell you to QPR and that'll be it, and we get the money in. I said, well, you should have done that 2 weeks ago. But but you know, he wasn't able to do it, and as much as he tried to do things, it doesn't work out. And that's when you can see he was getting a bit, you know, the sickness was kicking in and things like that for him. So
it was a Christmas day, and he used to clench his fist, you know. And I said to him, "What is wrong with you?" I said, "No, I'm all right, just leave me alone," he used to say. "I'm going to lie down, you know." And I said, "Oliver, you've got a problem, we've got to get this sorted." I took him to see the doctor. I'll never forget this, never, as long as I ever live. I put him in the car and I drove him down to the doctor. And he went upstairs. And I was downstairs. I parked the car across the road. And I was sitting in it. And I was watching the door of the doctor's to see was he coming down. And an hour went by, an hour and a half, no sign of him. So I got out of the car and I went up. And when I went up, he was sitting in the corner, all on his own. And I said to him, "Ollie, what? Did you see the doctor?" He said, "Yes," he said. I said, "How long?" "Oh," I said, "a while ago." I said, "What's wrong?" And he looked at me and he wouldn't answer me. So I said, "Come on, we get in the car, we go home." He never said a word to me in the car. Not a word. And just as we were going into the house, he said, he thinks I have a tumour. I said, "Where?" He said, "In the brain, in the head."
In February 2007, with Byrne hospitalised due to an inoperable brain tumour, Shelbourne were demoted to the League of Ireland First Division as a result of their financial problems. The club's future hung in the balance. A group of current and ex-board members worked to save the club.
Big news in domestic soccer, of course, that Shelbourne were relegated by the FAI yesterday, and the First Instance Committee have given them a First Division licence, and Shelbourne Football Club have been meeting since 5 o'clock this evening to decide on their future. And joining us from there now is Gary Brown, am I correct in saying, Gary, the interim chairman of the club?
I think that's right there, yeah.
We were in a little bit of disarray. The club was in a bad place from an emotional point of view. We'd looked like, you know, not only were we going to go down to the second division, well, that had been ratified. We didn't have a manager. We didn't, very limited budget. It was a bit like coming into a dressing room after the end of a cup final, and you just conceded, you know, a 93rd minute OG, you know, and everyone was very deflated. But also as well, what was missing was the forever optimism and dynamism of Ollie Byrne. And I said, look, we could get this club back, and it was about motivating a really, you know, diverse group of people. We, you know, some of the supporters. We kind of just got it together. It was chaotic, and it was crisis management. But we managed to get it, and we managed to convince the FAI, to be fair, that we could keep going.
As the nature of Byrne's illness came to be known, his behaviour of the past year, and perhaps more, began to make sense to those close to him.
I'd say for a while he wasn't operating at his full faculties for quite a while before he got sick, you know, before it really became visible. So, I mean, anything that went on for, say, a year before that wouldn't surprise me, to be honest. You know, he wasn't as sharp as he used to be. He wasn't well.
Shelbourne and Ollie had run up debts of approximately €9 million chasing the dream. The club spent €3.8 million in 2006, 15 times what was spent when winning the first title under Byrne in 1992. As with wider Irish society during the Celtic Tiger, Shelbourne had been living on borrowed money and borrowed time, emboldened by a property bubble and reaching incredible highs, only to rapidly find themselves mired in crippling austerity.
There's also a bunch of games in the First Division as Shelbourne begin life in the lower league as they take on the mighty Kildare County at Tolka Park. Kick-off of that one is at 8 o'clock.
With clearing the debts an impossible task, the club was forced to found a new company to escape the burden. Although Shelbourne still play in Tolka Park, the club is effectively once again homeless, with the ground now out of the club's control and funds from its eventual sale to be used to repay the millions still owed by the previous company. As Shelbourne began the long road back, Ollie Byrne was facing his final few months.
One day I went down, and they told us they were sending him to the hospice in Erdell's Cross. So I got in the ambulance with Ollie, and he said to me, "This is final." I said, "Ollie, it's only final if you throw the towel in." I said, "You never know what can happen. You really never know." I said, "You have to try to be strong." I said, "You're as strong as a bull." I said, "You gotta believe." So it really became so hard after that to go down and see him. Somebody that was so active and so enthusiastic and incredibly strong, and you could see him deteriorating. It was incredible. But it became, when it was getting close to the finish, I don't think I will never forget it. I mean, to think that the little boy that I used to bring everywhere with me, when he was only so, you know, and I was 7 years older than him, and he used to latch on to me everywhere, you know. It didn't matter. He used to say, "I'm going with Joe, I'm going with Joe," and I was looking at him there, and it was soul destroying.
Ollie Byrne died on August 26, 2007. He was 63 years old. Having dedicated his life to Shelbourne, working at Tulka Park from early morning to late night each day, he had never married. He died with little to his name beside debt, having never accumulated any personal wealth from Shelbourne. He had lived his entire adult life in the family home with his siblings. At the first match following Byrne's death, Shelbourne supporters raised a banner proclaiming, "Ollie Byrne, hated or adored, never ignored."
Every day of my life I think of him. Absolutely. You know, and there was nobody had more arguments with Ollie than I did. But I miss him. You know, I absolutely miss him. His memory will never die with me. Just never. And, you know, not because he was a brother, because, you know, there were so many good things attached to him. But then again, he had shortcomings. Everybody has. There isn't anybody on this earth that hasn't got some sort of a shortcoming, you know.
Maybe that's the quality about Ollie. You kind of tend to remember the good times. As I said, when he chose to be, he was great company, great crack, and he did give us a hell of a ride, like, you know, in football, all the various league titles we won, and then the European adventures and so on. And that's kind of what you do remember Ollie for.
Was it worth it?
Yes and no.
I think all of the fans, I think they wouldn't swap all those good years. Maybe Ollie should have been made Taoiseach, because it would have been interesting when the Troika came calling anyway. That's all, you know. I can imagine them being pinned to the floor or something. They probably wouldn't have hung around too long anyway.
The very fact that we're here years later, I don't think there are too many people in the League of Ireland who people will, you know, still be talking about years after their death. And somebody who, you know, love him or loathe him, you know, he was unignorable at the time.
Lots of lean years that Ollie kept that club alive on his own. He had 2 or 3 years where there was a bit of a blip when his ambition overtook him, and he came unstuck. But he was nearly there. It's not as if he was missing the target by miles. He was very close, you know, and people should remember that.
I unfortunately have given my life to Shelbourne Football Club. Some people might say it is my life.
Go Loud selects every Sunday night.